Welcome everyone to the lecture themed team management. Team management will have a big chunk of communication in it, but also the theory of how to run a team and lots of hopefully useful little bits that you will find illuminating. So let's dive right in. First of all, team management is a term that denotes techniques, processes, and tools for organizing and coordinating a group of individuals working towards a common goal. I just thought I'd point that out so that we are straight on what we're talking about here. As you know, any workforce consists of people, and they're all doing their best. But the thing is, you need to actually tie these guys together somehow. It needs to be a concerted effort, otherwise you have all these single heroes going nowhere. And that thing that binds together individuals so that what they're aspiring to do means something is called communication. Communication is, and now I'm going to hit you with a lot of slides here now that actually explain what communication is. To communicate successfully, you must convey information, and you may find yourself exchanging thoughts, messages, and information with other people. You do that by using speech, visuals, such as writing on a board, signals, writing, and behavior. We're going to look at these in more depth in a little while. So let's look at this this information that you're conveying to other people when you're communicating. You are conveying information about needs, desires, perceptions, knowledge, and affective states, how stuff grabs you, right? There can be different kinds of communication in this regard. You can communicate intentionally or you can communicate unintentionally. That is what happens when people find out what you're up to even though you said nothing. Then you have unintentionally communicated something somehow. You can use conventional signals or you can use unconventional signals. And you can communicate linguistically, meaning using language, or non-linguistically, meaning not using language. You can also communicate in spoken modes or other modes. As I said, I'll show you these. But before we do that, let's look at a few more of the principles here. Communication is a process that requires a sender, a message, and a recipient. If you don't have these three, there will not be any communication, no matter how much you wish for it, okay? Sender, message, recipient. You need these three. Without it, no communication possible. And the communication process is considered complete once the receiver has understood the message. So give yourself no illusion. If you say something to somebody, that does not mean that you have communicated. You have communicated when that other person gets it and really gets it, not just says they got it. Okay? So the communication process is complete once you can be sure that you have come through all the way in the way you need them to. Gestures, any movements you make with your body, if you want them to be seen or not. Body language, how you stand, how you sit, how your head is held. Posture, that would mean, yeah, how you stand. The expression on your face, the eye contact you make. Some cultures make less eye contact than others, so that can vary. The clothing you're wearing is part of your communication. Try this. Go into a bank, and if they let you stand behind the teller, dressed like a construction worker, I don't think people are going to start handing you large wads of cash because they will expect a bank employee to wear a suit and tie, right? So you're communicating something with the way you dress. Your hairstyle does the same thing. There is something called corporate hairstyle. Or try having a corporate hairstyle when you're with your best rocker buddies somewhere. It might be an uncomfortable situation. The architecture you're entering says a lot about where you are. Yeah, you wouldn't mistake a church for a gym. They have certain symbols that will communicate. There are infographics, the tone of voice, design as a whole, and all these things together. So that is up to 93% of communication. So let's look at oral communication then. You can communicate orally using visual aids like I do here. I'm showing you all these slides. And non-verbal elements. A non-verbal element would be like, me walking up and down in front of the screen here, pointing at stuff, making certain movements to add emphasis. We are missing that here now. I hope you're not missing it. So oral communication can include speeches, presentations, discussions, and interpersonal communication. And when you do that, you will find that the body language and the tonality have greater impact than the actual content. Yeah, when I speak here, you will know by the tone of my voice when I'm saying the important bits because of the way I say them. When you are communicating, generally, there are a lot of undesirable aspects that go on, and you will want to obviously make sure they don't hinder you. Filtering is one of them. Filtering can occur through all sorts of ways. The simplest one would be if you're in a bad mood or if you are stressed, then there is a filter between you and your communication, and people can sense that. And it takes away from your effectiveness to communicate. There may also be selective perception in your audience. People may only hear certain things, and some of them may have chosen to do that, some of them cannot help it. You have people who only ever wake up when you say certain things. Everything else they sleep through solidly. It is perfectly possible that you can kill your own message by giving out too much information. The thing is, when you're giving information to somebody, they're like a hard drive that goes into overdrive. They start processing all that stuff. So if you give them too much to process, obviously your communication process will suffer. You may find that emotions can keep you from communicating successfully. If you are extremely excited about something, then you may communicate badly because you might skip stuff. You might speak too quickly, stuff like that. The language itself can be an undesirable aspect in communication. And I'm not necessarily saying speaking French to Italians, but the way you use your language. Are you cursing? You might lose your audience if you do. Are you using a dialect that may sound obnoxious? Or are you using your dialect in an exceptionally provocative way? This is all language use. Are your silences too long? I know that in some cultures the speed of diction needs to be much faster and the breaks between words needs to be shorter, otherwise people start falling asleep or running away and thinking that the speaker has lost the plot. So how long the silence can be is important. Communication apprehension. Could it be that someone is very nervous about this, that somebody doesn't want to talk or doesn't want to hear? Nervousness. There can also be problems of differences in communication between gender or genders, and issues of political correctness. Sometimes you may be communicating about sensitive issues, and it may be very hard to do so. And then there's the problem that some people think banter and jargon is perfectly acceptable when maybe it's not. Okay, so these are the undesirable aspects. Here we have them all gloriously lined up. Let's look at some of the other challenges here. When you're communicating, you have three challenges. There is a technical challenge of getting transmitted. You need to get through, is what we're trying to say here. You need to get through on a technical level. You also need to get through in terms of conveying your meaning in a precise enough manner. So there is a semantic challenge here, which means how you word things, how you speak. And then ultimately, there's the effectiveness challenge, which is all about, have you made a difference by communicating? Like we said before, if you don't see any change or if nothing happens after you've communicated something or said something, then you have not actually communicated because it's not causing change, right? So that is the third challenge of communication. Chandler said once that communicators are isolated individuals, and you will find yourself on your own every time you're communicating because it's like being a singer. You're formulating your message and it's just you doing it and you're sending it out there. And you have all these things here against you. Nobody cares if your purpose is different from theirs. Nobody cares if they got you wrong. Nobody cares if you're even in a place of authority to make these kinds of statements. And nobody cares if what you're saying is right for the context or not. You care about these things and you need to get these right. So the trick here is if you don't want to be an isolated communicator, make sure your purpose connects with the purposes of the people around you when you're communicating. You need to want the same thing, or they need to want the same thing as you, and you need to make that clear. It should be absolutely clear what you're saying, so the interpretations shouldn't take too long. It should be clear, okay? You should only say what you are authorized to say. If it's not your place to say something, then don't. And make sure that you're saying the right thing in the right place at the right time. Berlo has given us this famous sender message channel receiver model of communication. That is what SMCR stands for, sender message channel receiver. And he's basically saying the sender is using his communication skills, his attitude, his knowledge, comes from a certain social system and works within a certain culture. The message must have a content, certain elements to the content. There must be a certain amount of treatment to all that. It must be structured, and codes need to be taken into account. The channel through which the communication goes is either hearing or seeing or touching or tasting or feeling. It's just these five, it's the five senses. Makes perfect sense. And then finally, the receiver. The receiver is a mirror image of the sender, if you look at that, okay? The the sender and the receiver both have their communication skills. They both have attitudes, they both have knowledge, they both have a social system they come from, and they both have a culture they come from. And the sender and the receiver need to be mutually respectful of these so that they come through. We could distill it a little more. We could say, according to Berlow, communication has an information source which produces a message. It has a transmitter which encodes the message into signals. It has a channel, C, to which signals are adapted for transmission. There is a receiver which decodes or reconstructs the message from the signal. And normally that receiver would be in the destination where the message arrives. We have a few barriers here to effective human communication. One is a physical barrier. I don't think that one needs explaining. If you are 5,000 miles away from the person you're communicating to, that's quite a barrier. There may be a fault in the system that doesn't allow you to communicate with another person, such as something as simple as they don't have a telephone, or their phone number is offline, or something like that. There can be problems of attitude. Sometimes maybe the other person doesn't want to listen to you for some reason because you did something bad. There can be an ambiguity of words or phrases, which means you may say one thing and the other person thinks you said something else because the two words or phrases happen to mean the same thing. There can be problems with individual linguistic ability. So, if you're speaking to your foreign colleague and inundate them in banter, they may only get 20% of that. There may be physiological barriers, such as perhaps your colleague is actually hard of hearing and his hearing aid isn't working today. And then there is also the way in which information is presented. So the presentation of information is a very important skill of communicating and in communication. And there are many different ways of doing that. We've seen them in the previous slides already. You will always have interference called communication noise. And they are these different bits of communication noise. There may be environmental noise, such as an air conditioner running in the background, drowning out, or airplanes or whatever. There could be an actual physiological impairment noise, like I just said. Your conversation partner may have a disability. There can be a semantic noise, such as using words with double meanings. In the English language, that's considered very cool, and it happens a lot, but it is a lot better if you don't do that. So use words that really have a clear meaning. There is the syntactical noise, which can come from making mistakes in grammar. That is why non-native speakers often aren't good communicators. There could be organizational noise, which is all about organization. So it may well be that you're asking somebody directions and they're trying to be helpful and they're giving you a little more information than you need, and then that is simply badly stated because it doesn't lead you strategically and leanly to the info you have to have. There can be cultural noise, such as using a foreign greeting. Saying Merry Christmas in Saudi Arabia may not be entirely effective. And then there can be psychological noise, such as anger or sadness, which may be in you or in your listeners. So the more negatively charged your audience is, the less they will understand what you're saying, because their internal noise is so big. Their own thoughts, right, are drowning out what you're saying. Let's look at the bits that may or may not occur in your corporate communication, because you can actually avoid communication noise. You can avoid it in your emails, um, unfortunately not to a very high amount. Here, the stuff that is printed in gray is basically what doesn't occur when you're communicating, right? So when you're writing emails, it can be as noisy as you like around you. It's not a problem. And if you cannot hear, you can still read your emails. But all these other things here, the ones in black, which we have looked at, they can still all happen to you when you're writing an email. So syntactical noise, organizational noise, cultural noise, psychological noise, all this can still happen. In a presentation, you are particularly vulnerable because absolutely everything can happen. So presentations are actually a fairly risky way to communicate because so much can go wrong. There can be a noisy air conditioner. There can be airplanes starting over the building. You can have deaf or blind people sitting in there. You can be using words with double meanings. You may make grammar mistakes. You may say things badly. You may greet them in the wrong way, and you may have everybody angry or sad. So, presentation is clearly something to be taken seriously because all these risks are there. It's the same with phone calls, with the exception that you cannot be seen. And Skype conferences are a bit like that as well. When you're doing personal interactions, it is just as risky as a presentation because all these different things can still occur. All this different communication noise can occur. I suppose most of us will be working in business or in some professional capacity, so we will want to look at conventions in business communication, and I've just brought you some examples here. Uh, Maybe some of these don't really take in your cultural context or at your time. I mean, I'm recording this in 2017, but at the date of me saying all this, I find it to be quite true. So, one thing I would recommend when you're writing an email is never use formatted text. So, don't write it in bold, don't write it in italics, don't use color unless it's for effect, unless you've got no choice but to use it for emphasis. The thing is, though, that the person you're sending the email to may not see it. So your recipient may not see whatever you've done there. I tend to just write well so that I don't need all the gimmicks. If you do have a signature in your emails or anywhere else, like in an internet forum, for example, keep it small, keep it modest, keep it pale. It should be something that you only see when you look twice. So don't write too much in it either. Some people write half of their CV into their signature. But if it comes through a different system and it's broken down into raw text, then every single one of your emails may consist of 1 or 2 lines of text and 62 lines of signature. I also don't recommend people to include graphics in their emails or in their signatures because it makes your email slow. One big mistake that some people are making is that they're CCing in other people too much. Now, clearly, it is a good idea to do that sometimes when certain people also should know something. But there are people out there who will CC absolutely everybody they can even imagine just in case. This is absolute pandemonium. If you do that, then you have people beginning to chip into the situation, and it can escalate very quickly. So I would not do that unless you have very good reason to include someone. If somebody writes to you for the first time and you don't know what their gender is, try not to guess. Yeah, it's probably better to just write whatever you're writing to them in a neutral way, not using any gender specific words until you know. Some people think it's nicer to erase the original message when replying. I think that's a very bad idea. If somebody has emailed you, reply with the reply button and leave the original message in. Because chances are they're getting so many emails, they have completely forgotten what this was about. So you will do them a favor to leave that in place so they can backtrack and understand what this was about. Me, I tend to expect that people read their emails every day. Like if somebody doesn't respond to me after 2 days, I have to assume that there's something wrong with them or that they're ignoring me. And that creates a bad mood in both cases, because you don't want to worry about people, and obviously you don't want to imagine somebody ignoring you either. So I tend to answer my emails as soon as I see them. It takes seconds, and it's good that way. Sometimes emails come to you with a person in CC or several people in CC, and you may look at these people who are also CC'd in that email and go, why on earth did they include that person? And you may actually choose to remove that person. I often do that. If I think it's simply not something somebody should know, I remove them in my return email. Very often, people don't choose a meaningful subject line. Before you send off an email, it is a good idea to to think about a subject line that makes that email searchable. You may do two things with that. One is obviously you can formulate what is in your subject line in such a way that it may not even be required to read the email. It could be something as problem solved. Yeah, okay, great, done. They don't need to read your email. Or you put something in the subject line that makes your email searchable in your system. And if you're looking for something 2 years down the road, 4 years down the road, there it is, because you remember the word that you used. And it could be something as simple as plane ticket Stockholm. Why not? You find your old plane ticket that way. I think there's no reason to erase emails anymore these days. The storage capacity of any device is big enough to keep all your emails. And I see no reason why anybody should delete them. Most email programs let you spell check. I recommend doing that. So if something is underlined in red, try a few things until it stops that. It makes you look so much better. And if you're sending several emails to the same person about different things, it's clearly better than trying to just write one email and get everything taken care of in them. Like, let's say you have 6 different issues and you're writing a person about 6 different issues. You'll find it is a much more intelligent solution to send them 6 emails with a subject clearly demarcated in each one of them, because you don't know where that'll go from there. It may well be that that recipient is going to send these on somewhere else, and then you don't want all that other stuff in there, do you? I tend to maintain a certain amount of form in my text. I always have some sort of hello and some sort of sign off, just because it makes it seem a little more considered. And maybe it is, if you're taking your time to respond and you put all these formalisms on there, perhaps you are actually communicating more. I try to avoid attachments because they make things cumbersome, they can get overlooked, they can be registered as spam. So if it's text, I try to paste it in. Good. So these are the email tips. A few other reasons here for communication problems. It may well be that what you're saying is too difficult to understand. So don't say so much, or don't speak so much. Make sure you say something. Okay, so speak little but say a lot, and say enough. Yeah, it is important to speak up at meetings, for example. You don't want people to say, yeah, this person never said anything during the meetings, so we couldn't take it into account. And don't say too much either, because some things are um, discreet in handling. There may well be a problem of status perception. So if you're the boss, find a way to keep your employees informed about what they need to know and encourage feedback. And if you're not the boss, well, find a way to inform your boss without looking bad. There may be hindrances between employees. You'll find that in any given organization, there are people who don't like each other, so they're less likely to share information. And then you get this, you get a perfectly professionally run organization where maybe the hierarchy levels are interfering with the flow of information. You may even have a situation where people don't trust each other because of bad experience or because of the way the processes work. So it is probably a good idea to be as professionally honest as you can be and involve others in your decisions. And when you communicate orally, do it really well. Do it calmly, make sure everybody's listening, and say what counts. There are different ways of managing a team. So here we are, team management methods. A very famous one is the so-called Belbin team inventory. Belbin basically is a self-perception inventory. And it presumes that when you start in a team, then you will probably have a certain character in that team. And it can be predicted. We know who you are going to be when you're in a team because Belbin has given us a test that you can do. And you can find out which of 9 different types you're likely to be once you are in a team. So this is not the same as psychometric testing, and these are also not personality types. These are team types. That means whatever you may be, based on psychometric testing, or whatever else you may have experienced you are, in a team you are going to be something else yet again, because that's just how this works. So there are these 9 different roles that exist, and everybody pretty much fits into one of them. Here they are. These are the 9 different characters. One is the so-called plant. The plant type is typically a creative, unorthodox idea generator type of person. And if they are in a context where an innovative solution to a problem is needed, then the plant will be the first one who will come up with something. So they'll be quite free thinking, and that is a plant. I think a lot of designers are like this. The second type is the resource investigator. The resource investigator gives the team a rush of enthusiasm at the start of the project by vigorously pursuing contacts and opportunities. You might remember a person who's like that. The third type is the coordinator. Coordinators are typically confident, stable, and mature. And because they recognize abilities in others, they're very good at delegating tasks to the right person for the job. I'm sure you've been in situations where you had one guy just saying something like, you should be doing that. This would have been the coordinator. Only people like that have a line like that. Shapers. Shapers, like coaches, are people who challenge the team to improve. They're dynamic and usually extroverted people who enjoy stimulating others, questioning norms, and finding the best approaches for solving problems. The monitor evaluator is typically a fair and logical observer who judges what is going on in the team. The team worker is a bit like a psychiatrist or like an analyst, good listener and diplomat, talented at smoothing over conflicts and helping parties understand one another without becoming confrontational. The implementer takes their colleagues' suggestions and ideas and turns them into positive action. And the completer finisher is a perfectionist who will often go the extra mile to make sure everything is just right and the things he or she delivers can be trusted to have been double checked and then checked again. So this is the person you want to bring in at the end, because they can really hold things up at the beginning. And there may be a specialist. A specialist is obviously somebody with a high level of special knowledge, who brings a high level of concentration, ability, and skill in their discipline to the team, but can only contribute on that particular specialism and will tend to be uninterested in anything which lies outside the narrow confines of that. So that was Belbin. The next one I'm showing you here is Tuckman. Tuckman is an author who brought us the group development model with these 4 slogans: forming, storming, norming, performing. And these are basically the 4 phases of teamwork that can be observed whenever teamwork happens. So the forming phase is this. This is the first of the 4. The forming phase means that the team members are focusing on the exploration and the tasks that they are up against. They will avoid confrontation, be nice. They will still behave independently because they haven't grown together yet. They'll be on their best behavior, focused inwardly on themselves at the moment, thinking, how does this affect me? They may be motivated but uninformed of the issues and objectives of the team, and probably in the process of getting to know one another, exchanging personal information, and making friends. So at this stage, the forming stage, not much actually gets done yet. And if there is a supervisor, they need to be very directive, which means they need to tell everybody what to do during this phase. It is a good opportunity to understand who everybody individually really is, though, because they're still very much themselves. Then comes the storming phase, the second out of 4, where the team members are beginning to compete against each other with ideas for how to get this project done. They may discuss fundamentals such as who should lead what is this project about. They may become more open, and they may also become more confrontational. And if they're not a mature team, or if they're not good professionals and experienced, this may be where it ends. So this is often where projects get stuck. So the supervisor must must continue to be directive here. All the differences between team members must be resolved. So if people don't like each other at this stage, this must somehow be dealt with. And they need to become comfortable about dealing with each other. So whatever struggle and arguments occurs, well, it's normal, but it should be over by the end of this phase. Now, if the team has survived that second phase of storming, it will get into the third phase of 4, the norming, where the team members really have just the one goal: and they will come up with a plan that they stick with. Some of them may have given up on the ideas that they have previously presented because they realize they don't fit in, and that's fine with them. They are basically signing up for the greater good, and everybody is working towards the success of the team's established goals. So that's when things really calm down, get systematic, strategic, and generally move ahead. And then you have the final phase where the team members are functioning as a unit. The supervisors may again participate. They didn't in the previous, necessarily anyway. There will be no inappropriate conflict. So if there is conflict, it'll be about something professional or something unavoidable. No, something avoidable. There will probably not be any need for external supervision because at this stage the team is so fired up about getting the job done that they'll just power on. Um, yeah, and you can read it here. I mean, this is basically the end where it all leads to yeah, a good conclusion. Teams can also fail, like I've mentioned a few moments ago. They usually do this because there may be a lack of sufficient charter. This is all Ken Blanchard's stuff. They may fail because they aren't sure what actually requires team effort and what doesn't. They may fail because they aren't telling each other what they've done. How do you overcome that? You hold meetings regularly. Yeah, if you want mutual accountability, it means everybody tells everybody else what everybody's been up to regularly. There may be a lack of resources. Yeah, no chainsaw, no cash, no coffee, no project. There may not be any good leadership. There may be bad planning or no planning. There may not be any support for management or by management. If there's conflict, perhaps it'll break everything. Perhaps they're not ambitious enough regarding how good it should be or how creative the outcome should be. Or perhaps the people involved just don't know what they're doing because they haven't been trained enough. So all this could be at the heart of what goes wrong in teams. And this is how they succeed. First of all, do we all want the same thing? There has to be a purpose of the project and there have to be values that everybody subscribes to. So if the team has a compelling vision, a sense of purpose, and a common set of values, it should work. Can they act? The word for this is empowerment. So if the team has the authority to act and make decisions, it should work out. But if they're completely constricted, well, it may not. Do the team members trust each other? How are the relationships between the members? How is the communication? Is there a certain amount of flexibility in the team? We know that sometimes projects require a change in course and approach. Can the team handle that? Then, are we serious about getting this done? Is there optimal productivity, a commitment to high standards, commitment to quality? Does everybody hold each other accountable? And do you strive for continual improvement? And then there's this: can we encourage each other? Is the team giving each other positive feedback? When things go well, is there recognition? This builds esteem, obviously, and enhances a feeling that things are going well and that it's worth to keep going. And that builds a good mood. So can we keep the good mood up? How's the morale? Is everybody enthusiastic? Does everybody stay enthusiastic? Are they proud of what they've achieved so far? Does it feel good to be part of that team? All that is in there. And first and foremost, do we feel like we are we? Is there a sense of unity? Do they feel like they're part of a team? And that's team management. I hope I have touched on everything that might interest you. Obviously, it's only touching on stuff, it's an overview. If any of these points interest you, just find them somewhere. All the best.